Hey folks, David from Default Sound here, and today I'm going to do a tutorial on how you can reassign your mod wheel or your sustain pedal or your pitch bend to something other than a built-in mod wheel, pitch bend, or sustain pedal on your MIDI hardware. You may have already tried to do this in MainStage and realized that it doesn't work straight out of the box. You can't just pick a knob or a fader on your hardware and assign it in layout mode and it just works. So there's a reason for that, and so I'm going to show you how to do it and then explain the reason why there's an extra step involved. It still just takes a minute. So I'm going to turn around here and I'll show you how. Alright, so I have Sunday Keys open today, and so right now I have this just stock Sunday Keys patch. And as I move my mod wheel up, then the pads and synths get brighter. So let's say that your keyboard doesn't have a mod wheel and you wanted to reassign to a knob or a fader. I'm going to use a random fader on my key station today. It's just the only fader on there. It says volume on it. And so I'm going to go over to layout mode. And I'm going to click on the on-screen mod wheel. And this is what you're going to need to do as your first step to reassign your on-screen mod wheel to do something, to be assigned to different MIDI hardware. So you're going to press the assign button here. And then you're going to move the fader or knob that you want to assign to. And you can see right away it picks it up and it starts to respond on screen. So now I go back over to edit mode, and you would think that that would be all you have to do. But it's not actually true. You can actually notice now that as I move this volume fader on my keyboard, it's actually muting my signal. And then as I move the fader up, even though the on-screen mod wheel is moving, it's not actually adjusting the filter cutoff that I have programmed to these pads. It's instead actually acting as a volume control. And there's a reason for this, and it has to do with the way that MainStage processes incoming MIDI information. If we go back over to layout mode, you can see that there are a few different types of controls down here in the screen control palette at the bottom of the screen. We have panel controls, which are things like faders, knobs, buttons, text, drum pad, stuff like that. And then we have this section of shelf controls, and this is important. I want you to note the type of controls that are here in the shelf controls. We have a keyboard, a mod or pitch wheel, sustain, a foot pedal, and a foot switch. Now the reason that these are distinct from panel controls is that in MainStage 3, shelf controls actually send MIDI through that they receive to all the plugins that are assigned to that MIDI input. So in edit mode, when you're at the channel strip level and you select a channel strip, you can use the MIDI input tab to tell that channel strip which MIDI controller to listen to. And that is actually how MainStage knows to sustain that specific channel strip when you're pressing the sustain pedal, or to handle modulation and process it through that channel strip when you're using your mod wheel. Now this is tied to the MIDI CC number that your hardware actually sends on. So your keyboard is sending in MIDI note values, and then there's a few standards for the MIDI CC number that pitch bend, modulation, and sustain send on. So sustain, as I press my sustain pedal, you can see up here, my first number is 1. That means I'm on MIDI channel 1. And then the second is 64, and that's the MIDI CC number I'm sending on. And so in the MIDI standard, 64, number 64 is the MIDI CC for sustain. And then you can see every time I press, it sends a 127, and when I release, it sends a 0. So when MainStage sees that signal, it basically passes it through to all the instrument plugins and lets them know the sustain pedal is being pressed and released. And that's the same as the notes. It's letting the plugins know he's playing C3 and his velocity is 93. So the MIDI CC number for modulation is 1. And as I sweep my mod wheel up, I go up to 127. As I sweep back down, I go all the way down to 0. And then pitch bend actually lives on number 0. So the problem is when I assign my on-screen mod wheel to this volume fader on my keyboard, you can see as I move it, the on-screen mod wheel is moving, but up in my MIDI in section here, I'm actually sending on MIDI CC7, not on MIDI CC1. So right now I'm moving my physical mod wheel, and you can see it's on 1. But the assignment I made to the on-screen mod wheel is not on the correct MIDI CC number. It's on 7. And 7 actually in the MIDI standard is the standard number for volume. So that's why when we made that assignment and then we went over to edit mode, even though the on-screen mod wheel was moving, all of the plugins were being passed through MIDI data on CC number 7. So that's the volume CC. That's why when this is down, there's no sound. And as I move it up, the sound fades in. So what we need to do is basically tell MainStage to translate or send through this information a little bit differently. And you're going to want to do this at the concert level. So it's totally fine, and this is the first step you need to do in layout mode, to assign your mod wheel or your sustain or your pitch bend to whatever hardware you want to have control it. So it could be a knob or a fader on your nano control. It really doesn't matter what the hardware is sending on. There's just the second step of telling MainStage how to translate and pass through that data to your plugins. So we're going to be here at the concert level. And all you need to do is select the on-screen control that you need to translate or tell MainStage to pass through. So in this case, it's going to be modulation, but if it was sustain or pitch bend, it would be the exact same process, only you'd select the appropriate translation. So we have our mod wheel selected, and here in the mapping section, we're going to go down to send to all, and then you want to choose the name of your keyboard. So my main keyboard is just known as keyboard 1. But if you had a specific brand of keyboard assigned in layout mode, it might show up as the name of your keyboard. You just want to choose that, keyboard 1 destinations. And then here we have a list of all of the MIDI CC numbers, pitch bend, all the way up through 127. So all we're going to do is select MIDI CC 1, which, as we talked about a minute ago, is the modulation CC. So now, anytime we move my physical volume fader that we assigned in layout mode, you can see that is still sending in on CC number 7. But at the concert level, MainStage is translating that to send out CC1, which is modulation. And it's sending to all channel strips that are connected to keyboard 1, that are assigned to keyboard 1 in their MIDI input tab, which in my concert is all of my channel strips. And if you've got a single keyboard setup, then all of your channel strips are going to default to whatever MIDI keyboard you have connected. So you don't really need to worry too much about that unless you have multiple keyboards. So now I can go here to my first patch. And as I move my volume fader, my physical volume fader, it's moving the on-screen mod wheel, and then MainStage is translating that mod wheel movement at the concert level to send to keyboard 1 destinations modulation. So you could do this you could send any MIDI CC that you wanted to if you wanted to try and get creative, play around with it. But mostly MainStage's shelf controls are worried about the modulation CC, which is 1, sustain is 64. Doing this at the concert level is how you can fix an inverted sustain pedal. You would just select the on-screen sustain pedal, keyboard 1 destinations, and then you'd go up to 64, which is sustain. And if it were inverted, then you could just click that invert button if your pedal didn't have a physical switch on it, and that would resolve the inverted pedal behavior for you. So you can manipulate all sorts of stuff here at the concert level once you understand what shelf controls are, what type of data MainStage automatically passes through to plugins, then you can begin to manipulate it. So that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful for you. If it was, please leave a comment, like, share this video with a MainStage using friend, and I'd love it if you follow Default Sound on social media. You can check us out on YouTube, you can download some free patches, and check out all of our MainStage resources at defaultsound.com. Have a great day.